Hey everyone, Shin here. So now that the balance patch has dropped and I've been able to test all those changes, I can finally bring you all the formal guide for the Spellbreaker setup that I've been running since the expansion launch and even a little before in the beta weekend events. This is a build that I've been having a lot of fun with in PvP, World v World, and PvE. I've been wanting to share it with you guys for a while, but I wanted to make sure it would still work after the first major balance patch, and thankfully it still does. Similar to a lot of the other builds that I've done guides for, this is a very high-risk, high-reward build where it doesn't have a lot of defensive capability, but instead it's very offensive, and so long as you use skills properly and you position yourself well and you combo correctly, you can absolutely delete people and just go on the offensive for a majority of the time and just kill them before they can kill you. Alright, getting into the details of how this build works. This is a greatsword dagger build that is heavily focused around building a lot of might very quickly and then using that might to both sustain yourself and deal a lot of damage to your opponents and kill them quickly before they can kill you. Alright, for the utilities, you've got natural healing. This acts as a large heal after taking spikes of damage. It acts as a large condition clear after getting, say, condition bombed. And it also provides a few stacks of the insight buff, which gives you more damage. For the first utility, it's going to be either Featherfoot Grace if you are in open world PvE for the super speed, the resistance, and the 30-second stun break, and it's going to be Balance Stance for World of World and PvP because of the crit immunity, the stability pulse, and the stun break. The second utility is going to either be Berserker Stance or Endure Pain. It depends on what you are fighting in any of the three modes. If you feel you need the power damage immunity, take Endure Pain. This is my default in World of World and Open World PvE just because there tends to be a lot more spike damage there than conditions. And in PvP, I tend to default to Berserker Stance just because there's a lot more threat from conditions than there is direct power damage because of all the dodging you have access to while fighting in, say, team fights or on a point. The third utility is going to be Bull's Charge. This is the same for all three modes. This is going to give you a lot of flexibility in approaching situations. It gives you a tool for engaging, disengaging. It allows you to evade attacks. It allows you to set up combos. It allows you to boost your damage output. It allows you to close gaps. In general, it's just a very versatile and very useful utility to have. And then finally, the elite skill is going to be Signet of Rage, again for all three modes. The main reason for this is because it synergizes very well with the traits and the central synergies of this build, which I will get into shortly. It's also just much better than the alternative elites, say Winds of Disenchantment or Rampage for this build. It just synergizes a lot more nicely and has a lot more utility. Alright, moving on to traits. This is a Strength, Discipline, Spellbreaker build. The traits for all three modes are identical, nothing changes between them. Up in Strength, the Adept trait is Peak Performance. This is going to reduce the cooldown of Bull's Charge as well as make it provide a damage buff whenever it's used. The second trait in the Master slot is going to be Forceful Greatsword to reduce the cooldowns of your Greatsword skills as well as make them generate might on crits. And the Grandmaster trait in Strength, which is the most important trait in this entire build, Might Makes Right. This is going to cause every stack of might that you give yourself to heal you a little bit and generate a little bit of endurance. This is where a majority of the build's sustain actually comes from, is all of the extra endurance that you're getting from this trait. Down in Discipline, for the Adept trait, you have Warrior Sprint. This is the standard melee build trait that allows you to get out of immobilizes and in general just stick to your targets. The Master trait is Brawler's Recovery. This is condition management. There's not much else to say about it. And the Grandmaster trait is Heightened Focus. This will give you the quickness to either deal more damage to targets that you already have low, or allow you to use things like natural healing more quickly and guarantee their cast, as opposed to having the longer cast and potentially getting interrupted. And then finally, down in Spellbreaker, the Adept trait is Pure Strike. This is primarily taken just because it's more damage. However, it also will synergize well with the Master trait, which is Sun and Moon Style. Sun and Moon Style will give you quickness whenever you interrupt someone while your daggers are out. This means Dagger 3, Full Counter, and Bull's Charge will all give you quickness if you have your daggers out at the time. In addition, all of your dagger crits and any crits you make while your daggers are out will give you a little bit of healing. It's not a lot, but it is a steady flow of healing that does add up over the course of a fight. And then finally, the Grandmaster trait is Magebane Tether. This, similar to Might Makes Right, is one of the cornerstones of the build. This is going to give you a reveal on targets you hit with your burst skills. It's going to give you constantly pulsing might on yourself, which synergizes well with Might Makes Right. And in fact, if you look at the numbers, while you have Magebane Tether active, it actually gives you as much healing, if not slightly more, than Healing Signet. So having Magebane Tether active while you're fighting someone is effectively the same as having Healing Signet. In addition to this, the tether can also be broken as a pull, which will allow you to further lead into combos or continue combos. In general, it's just a very useful trait that synergizes very nicely with Might Makes Right and the build as a whole. Alright, now for the gearing. In PvP, this build uses Berserker Amulet. The damage values in PvP I found are not so high that you have to have something like, say, Demolisher or Marauder to survive. You can do just fine with Berserker. The runes are going to be strength runes because this build wants to generate as much might as it can, as often as it can, and it's going to have might a lot, so that damage modifier from the 6-piece bonus is going to kick in a lot. The sigils are going to be sigils of courage and battle on both weapons. This is, again, just to generate as much might as possible, as often as possible, and synergize with all the things that the traits provide. In World v. World, you're going to want to have Berserker Trinkets and Berserker Weapons. However, you will want Marauder Armor. The extra health is going to allow you to stay alive just long enough to kill your targets, as opposed to Berserker Armor, where you may or may not be able to last long enough to kill your target. The runes are going to be Durability. This, again, helps to keep you in the fight for longer and kill your target before they kill you. Strength runes are also viable if you decide to go with the more damage-oriented route. However, the toughness and the vitality from durability runes is very nice to have. The sigils in the weapons, in the Greatsword, you're going to want to have Air and Hydromancy. This is going to give you bursts of damage on your crits from the Air sigil, and whenever you switch to your Greatsword, the Hydromancy sigil is going to give you Chill, but more importantly, it will also give you a nice big burst of damage that you can use for burst combos on your targets. And for the daggers, you're going to want to take Draining and Severance. This is going to give any interrupt you have while you have your daggers out Life Drain, a burst of damage, and then a damage buff to your Precision and Ferocity. And then finally for the consumables, you're going to want to use Superior Sharpening Stones and Plates of Truffle Steak. I did try the, I believe it was Orion Meat and Truffle Soup. It's dodge and might on dodge food. It did not give me as much damage as I would have liked, so I would say shy away from that unless you really want to have the more defensive option. And then finally, for open world PvE, you can use everything that I just talked about with World v. World. However, if you really want to go for the full damage option and you have the resources available to do so, I would advise going full Berserker armor with full Zerker everything else, and then use strength runes instead of the durability runes. This is going to give you as much damage as you can possibly get, because you will always have that damage modifier from having might all the time, and you'll have might for longer, and in general it just synergizes well with the build. You can technically use Scholar, however you will be taking damage from mobs hitting you in the face, so just be aware of that. You may or may not have your Scholar bonus up as often as you would the might modifier from the strength runes. Alright, now for the general playstyle of the build. It's fairly straightforward in what you want to do with this build. You want to engage your target, get into melee as soon as you can, and then roll through combos and CC them as much as you can to blow them up. The primary tools for doing so are going to be Bull's Charge, Dagger 3 Disrupting Stab, and Dagger 4 Wasteland's Ruin. These are going to be probably your three most important skills to be using when fighting and downing targets. The Bull's Charge is going to give you a nice gap close with evade frames, which will allow you to get in your target very quickly. Ideally, you want to use this when you are still within range of the skill's effect, where you can knock them down at the end of it. And once you have knocked them down, then you can switch to your daggers, or you can engage with the daggers out and hit them with the Dagger 4, Wasteland's Ruin. It's a very powerful skill, and you want to try and capitalize on its strengths as much as possible. A lot of this kit is designed around essentially CCing your target and hitting them with Wasteland's Ruin, and otherwise doing general damage until you can get that combo up again. It's not by any means the only thing that this build uses to kill targets, but it is a very powerful tool in the kit nonetheless. Other than those combos, a lot of your damage on this build is just going to come from general weapon skill usage. Things like any of the greatsword skills, especially Whirlwind Attack and Rush and 100 Blades, if you're able to get the cast off, these will all do a lot of damage and give you a good amount of might. Both of the burst skills, the Arcing Slice on the greatsword and the Breaching Strike on the dagger, these are both going to do a decent amount of damage. The greatsword burst, Arcing Slice, is going to still hit very hard. It's going to hit as hard as if you had the Core Warrior Tier 3 version of it. It just won't give you as much fury. Now, another tool that this build has that's very great for keeping pressure up as well as for rolling into combos is Reckless Dodge. This build generates a lot of might, which means through the Might Makes Right trait, you're also generating a lot of endurance, which means you are able to dodge a lot more than usual. What this means is not only can you dodge a lot of incoming attacks, but you are also able to proc Reckless Dodge a lot. And this is going to be a nice, big, unblockable packet of damage that you can drop on people who have Aegis up, who are hiding behind, say, shield block, and you will be able to take advantage of it a lot with just the raw amount of endurance you're going to be generating. Now, segueing from the dodges into the defensive aspects of the build, this is a setup that primarily relies on its offense for its defense. This build primarily sustains itself through the sheer amount of endurance generation that it has, through all the might it's gaining, and just the amount of pressure that it's able to put on your opponents and keep them on the back foot. Your utility skills are primarily there to just keep the momentum going and keep the pressure up. The stances you have access to are primarily there to just let you continue doing damage without worrying about going down in the middle of it. That being said, if your opponent is able to dodge a lot of your attacks and otherwise prevent you from getting all of this might, or prevent you from landing your Magebane tether, or otherwise sustain themselves and push against your pressure hard enough, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to take them out before they kill you. This build is very glassy and cannot withstand a lot of pressure very well. It can dodge pressure a lot, but it can't withstand actual hits and actual condition bombs very well outside of using those cooldowns. In situations where you are getting pressured too much, your best option is to use the build's mobility to get out of that situation, maybe reset the fight, or go to a different point in PvP, or get away from the mobs in PvE, something to get yourself out of that bad situation, and then come back when you've got your tools back available and you're able to put the pressure back on them as opposed to having to keep yourself alive. Two other general defensive tools that you have at your disposal with this build are Full Counter and the Blade Storm on the Dagger 5. I haven't talked much about these because they aren't really for central defensive mechanics. These are more so situational tools that you can use for disrupting people who are rezzing your targets, for interrupting casts, for deflecting projectiles. Full Counter is primarily just used as disruption and for eating like 1 or 2 hits. It's not really a central function of the build, it's just another tool to use for defense and disruption. Meanwhile, Dagger Storm is primarily used to give yourself swiftness, stack some vulnerability on your target for more damage, and reflecting projectiles. I don't really use Blade Storm outside of one of these things. It's okay damage, but it's better used for the utility you get out of it. And then finally, I actually want to make a special mention about how you should be managing your boons with this build. As you've probably gathered by now, this build generates a lot of might. So much so to where you will have 25 stacks of might pretty much all the time, or at least a good amount of might at any given point. I've commonly looked down at my boon bar and seen 25 stacks without even trying. You don't need to worry about might with this build. The boon you should be worrying about is actually Fury. A lot of how this build sustains itself, and in general just is able to do what it's able to do, is by critting. All of your critical strikes give you several benefits that I've gone over, and when you have Fury, that's more crit chance, which means more crits and more benefits. Fury is the thing that you want to be trying to keep on yourself as much as you can through both Signet of Rage and Arcing Slice from the Greatsword. Don't worry about having it on you all the time, just try and have it up when you can. Try and have it up as often as you can. And then finally, other than the boons that you get from durability runes in World of the World, you'll have some access to swiftness. This is going to come from your Dagger 5, and again from Signet of Rage. Swiftness in this build isn't actually useful for the reason you might think it is. For maneuvering the battlefield, you've got Warrior Sprint. What swiftness is actually most useful for in this build is as fodder for the clear on natural healing. When you use natural healing, you gain a stack of insight for every boon that you just removed. That includes swiftness, which means you get more damage from clearing the swiftness from yourself. And of course, this also applies to fury and might. When you clear those with natural healing, you'll get a stack of insight for those as well. But swiftness, if you have it up and you use your heal, you get yet more damage through another insight stack. Alright, and that should do it for this build guide on the Spellbreaker setup I've been using. If you feel I missed something and you're curious about how to use a certain aspect of the build, hopefully the gameplay footage I've had during this video has clued you in and given you an answer for that. If not, feel free to leave a comment and I will answer when I am able. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoy the build. If you decide to give it a try, hopefully you enjoyed the build video. If you really enjoyed it, feel free to let other people know about the build. I personally have a lot of fun with it. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea just because of how glassy it is, but I find it a lot of fun and I wanted to share it with you all. So if you have a friend who you think might like this type of build, feel free to let them know about this video. And other than that, I will catch you guys around the stream or in the next video. Thanks for watching.